The United States and Israel have started a war with Iran that is very soon going to look much like the war between Ukraine and Russia, and here's why. The surprise attack on Iran was intended to decapitate the leadership by killing Ayatollah Khomeini in a way of making sure that Iran's Islamic theocracy would fall and crumble to the ground. But in fact, that didn't happen. What happened instead is that Ayatollah Khomeini was assassinated and then immediately replaced by a new Ayatollah Khomeini, the exact person that Donald Trump told the whole world he would not accept. In that very simple action, Iran sent a message loud and clear to the rest of the Western world that it was not going to give up easily, that it could prolong and withstand this fight for as long as needed. This was the same kind of message that we saw coming from President Zelensky shortly after Russia invaded Ukraine. When Russia's first tranche of attacks was unsuccessful and Ukraine's defense allowed the government to maintain just a little bit longer, it created two powerful opportunities. First, it made Russia look weak in the face of a much smaller, much weaker military force. Second, it created an opportunity for Western powers to rally and start providing support to Ukraine. The exact same two opportunities have now been created for Iran as well. By surviving the first onslaught of attack and by identifying a new Ayatollah Khomeini, this time Mujtaba Khomeini, Iran has shown that it can also survive against a much stronger, much more capable military force, and that the Islamic Republic would not back down. And the second opportunity is happening in front of our eyes even as we speak. Support is flooding into Iran, specifically from countries like Russia, China, and even Pakistan. While foreign support to Iran wasn't present on day one, it very quickly made itself clear before the end of the first week, with Russia providing intelligence support to help Iran identify, prioritize, and choose targets that it could effectively reach with its limited ballistic missiles and its Shahed drones. Russia's decision to get involved in the fight came shortly on the heels of Ukraine's decision to also get in the fight, supporting Israel and the United States in learning how to defend against Iran's Shahed drones. So in many ways, the same drone war that we've watched playing out in Ukraine is now migrating its way into the Middle East, with of course the Iranians using their native Shahed drones and the United States using their own version of a reverse-engineered Shahed drone to fight back. But the drone war is actually the most superficial part of the similarities that exist between Iran and the United States and Ukraine and Russia. The bigger, more important parallel is coming from the idea of foreign support that will exacerbate and prolong the conflict much longer than what would have happened had it just been a conflict between two powers, a small, weaker military force and a much stronger, dominant military force. And that support is, of course, coming from foreign powers like China, Russia, and even Pakistan. Now, Pakistani support has been the most limited primarily to just political statements and support for the Shia minority and the perceived martyrdom of their Ayatollah Ali Khomeini. When we start looking at Russia and China, we see much more substantive support to Iran, particularly the type of support that could be prolonged over time, that could really turn Iran into Donald Trump's forever war. In much the same way that the Taliban, another theocracy, turned Afghanistan into Bush's and then Obama's and then of course Trump's forever war. So let's dig into exactly how Russia and China are helping Iran. And we'll start with Russia first. So yes, Russia is of course providing intelligence support that not only helps Iran choose which targets to prioritize, but also helps Iran to identify the locations in Iran that Israel and the United States are either not able to reach or not paying attention to at any given time. Russia comes with superior satellite intelligence, which is known as imagery intelligence, or IMIT. And it can provide that imagery to Iran to help it identify its target acquisition and help it identify movements of Israeli and American military forces. But we also see Russia supporting tactical on-the-ground efforts, not only for Iran in general, but for the IRGC specifically. And if Iran is learning from Russian tactics, then it's safe to say that Iranian proxies are also benefiting from Russian tactics, which means Hezbollah, Hamas, and even the Houthis are gaining at least secondary benefit from tactical training that comes by way of the Russian military. Now, before anybody says that the Russian military isn't that impressive, consider the fact that Russia and Ukraine have been engaged in a near-locked war for the last 4 years. Both countries have some of the most current battlefield experience, warfighting experience, and active logistical supply chain management experience in the game. One of the areas that Russia has not been able to help Iran is really economically, because Russia primarily relies on its own oil supplies as exports to create its economic foundation, which is the same primary foundation that Iran uses to generate its own economic income. So for Russian support, it's primarily focused on the battlefield, which means it's going to tie to ground troops, missile salvos, and a whole large realm of intelligence collection, intelligence analytics, and intelligence support. It would also not be a surprise to see Russian support in terms of telecommunications, weapons, ballistics, ammunition, artillery, because Iran has supported Russia in many of the same ways during their war on Ukraine. In fact, some of the best ways to consider how Russia might help Iran is by looking at how Iran has helped Russia in the past. Iran supported Russia by providing them with drone technology, not just providing them with drones like the Shahed drone, but by actually showing them how to build their own drones and helping them create their own plans to manufacture the drones in Russia. So it wouldn't be a surprise to start seeing some of those drones built in Russia sent to Iran to start being used in the fight against the Americans and the Israelis. Iran also helped Russia by teaching them how to get around the sanctions that were posed on them during the Ukraine war. Iran is an expert at knowing how to get around, bypass, and subvert international sanctions in order to still make economic income, and to do it without relying on the US dollar. So now that Russia has had that financial support from Iran, it wouldn't be a shock to start seeing additional support from Russia to Iran in terms of some kind of financial workaround, whether that's direct loans or whether that's some way of subverting economic sanctions so that Iran can generate its money on its own. Lastly, Iran supported Russia with ammunition and artillery at the very critical moment where Russian-made ammunition and artillery started to run low. We don't know how much Iran may have also participated in joint negotiations with China and North Korea, all of which have rallied together to help Russia in their fight against Ukraine. So there's a large black curtain around how close these foreign powers have collaborated in the past and how they might coordinate again to support Iran in the fight against the United States and Israel. But now let's look at China's involvement in the war in Iran. Now, while China has not made the same splash on headlines that Russia has made in their support to Iran, it's important to notice where China is and has been supporting Iran. First, China is extremely loyal to Iran because 12% of all the consumed oil in China actually comes from Iran traditionally. So if historically we've seen energy consumption from China of at least 12% coming directly from Iran, we can expect to see even more coming from Iran as they have a war that they have to fund. So we should expect to see more Iranian oil going to China, and China buying more Iranian oil again without the US dollar, which has a double benefit to China. It reduces the valuation of the US dollar, which continues to increase the inflation of the US dollar for you and me, but it also gives Iran a way to bypass sanctions and get oil to China in exchange for revenue from China, much needed revenue that it will need to continue fighting this war against Israel and the United States. But even more important than the flow of oil is the flow of technology from China to Iran. China has helped Iran build their electronic warfare capability and their offensive cyber operational capability. That same cyber operational capability that you see playing out in headlines right now as hackers hack from Iran against major industries in the United States, like financial targets, medical targets, and even telecommunication targets. All of that offensive cyber capability came from China, and the electric warfare capability that supports it also came from China. Not to mention the fact that China also supports the ballistic missile program in Iran, both non-nuclear and nuclear. Iran uses China's GPS network. Iran uses Chinese telecommunication networks. Iran even uses Chinese stealth detection capabilities. So much of the technological backbone of Iran is actually built on Chinese tech, which means that China gets a chance to exercise how capable their tech is in an active war zone against the United States, which is going to help China gain insight into what a potential conflict over Taiwan would look like, how resilient their GPS, how resilient their telecommunications, and how resilient their own aircraft detection services really are. If you really think about it, you've been seeing the Secretary of War Pete Hegseth and Israel's Netanyahu himself talk about the air dominance that Israel and the United States have over Iran. Despite having such dominance in the air, you also still see rockets coming out of Iran and Lebanon going into Israel and other targets across the Middle East. Well, if there's such air superiority, how are there also missiles that can still take off? That's because of Chinese capability. Because China is able to help Iran distract their enemy, know their enemy's whereabouts, and hide their missile launches. The strategy here is crystal clear. As long as Iran can degrade the United States, Russia and China benefit from watching it play out, seeing the US's capabilities, seeing the US's limitations, and watching how Chinese and Russian systems hold up against American systems. It's the same strategy that the United States and many powers across Europe have used in Ukraine, as they've supported Ukraine depleting Russia. So this idea of a proxy war has really entered a whole new phase. Not only is Ukraine a proxy for the United States and the West against Russia, but now we're seeing that Iran is a proxy for the Eastern powers like China and Russia against the United States specifically, and Israel to a secondary level. The United States is spending more than $5 billion a week executing operations against Iran. Iran is spending a small fraction of that defending itself. So who's really going to be able to prolong this war longer? The United States economy or the Iranian economy that's currently being picked up by Russia and China, spreading the weight and spreading the cost because there is a military benefit to having an alliance at this time against the United States and Israel. Not only are we seeing missiles coming out of Iran, but we're also seeing the United States claim that the Iranian Navy has been completely obliterated, even though Iran still has ships to place mines across the Straits of Hormuz. While the contradictions are everywhere, the capability that Iran maintains is very clear, and that capability isn't native exclusively to Iran. In large part, that capability only exists because of Iran's alliance with foreign powers, and those foreign powers stand to benefit by turning this Iranian conflict into Trump's new forever war, Trump's version of Ukraine. This conflict is far from over. Even as we see it start to die down over the next few days and weeks, we'll very likely see it continue to heat up and cool down in cycles over the next few months and years. Not only because it benefits Iran and China so much, but because it also benefits the Islamic Republic that currently manages Iran. The longer that Islamic Republic exists, the longer it shows its legitimacy and its power and its strength and its martyrdom against Israel and the United States. And so much of the Islamic Republic is based on the idea of fighting a fight for a good, noble Islamic cause against the great Satan, the United States, and its Israeli partners. The symbolism is not only significant to Iranians, but to Shias worldwide. And Iran's goal has always been to recreate a Shia caliphate across the Middle East. And there's no better way of showing the resilience and the strength and God's favor for Shia Islam than by holding up a holy war against a far superior military coalition. And you don't even have to win. You just have to survive. Because if you can survive long enough, like the Taliban showed us in the global war on terror, then ultimately the theocracy will win out in the end. Just like the Taliban survived 20 years of onslaught by the United States, the Islamic Republic is also looking at whether or not they can do the same thing. Because the same humiliation that occurred when the United States had to leave Afghanistan with their tail between their legs is the same humiliation Iran wants to recreate for the United States and the West. The story that we see in Iran is not just a story of the US versus Iran, it's also a story of the US versus China. And that's why you see so many American actions trying to reduce their dependency on Chinese supply lines. And one of the key ways the US is trying to reduce that dependency on China is specifically in the battery space. And a company called Nouveau Monde Graphite Incorporated is playing a critical role in US strategic efforts to decouple from China. Nouveau Monde Graphite Incorporated, ticker symbol NMG, is North America's first fully integrated carbon-neutral provider of graphite anode that's used in lithium-ion batteries. Lithium-ion batteries are critical to the everyday life that you live. They power your laptop, they power your smartphone, they power your e-bikes, they power your electric vehicle, they power your cordless tools, they power your medical devices. Most of the modern world is powered by lithium-ion batteries, and China has traditionally held 80% of the global market for producing lithium-ion batteries. And a big part of that dominance that China maintains is because they maintain a 95% monopoly over the production of graphite anodes specifically, a core component and critical mineral needed to make lithium-ion batteries. Lithium-ion battery consumption has increased 20-fold, 2,000% in the last 5 years alone, and that's where NMG comes in. NMG has created a North American solution, a way of permanently separating the United States and Canada's requirements for graphite anode completely separate from China, which creates an indigenous capability for North America to not only create graphite anode and lithium-ion batteries on its own, but to use that graphite anode in a larger range of strategic technologies because graphite anode has been identified as a critical need mineral. Nouveau Monde Graphite Incorporated, ticker symbol NMG, has created a distinct advantage for Canada and the United States and really all of the Western world to segregate and reduce its dependency on China for critical needs. Whether you're a strategic investor, a news junkie, or an everyday Joe, NMG is literally powering your future. I don't want you to take my word for it. Look them up for yourself. Nouveau Monde Graphite Incorporated, ticker symbol NMG, and I'll see you on the other side.